The year was 2471, and humanity had long since mastered space travel. The stars were no longer distant, unreachable points of light. They were territories, resources, and opportunities. The United Earth Alliance, UEA, had expanded far beyond the solar system, colonizing planets and moons, mining asteroids, and building a network of thriving civilizations scattered across the Milky Way. But even with all their advances, there were still vast reaches of space that remained uncharted, unexplored, and, for some, untouched by the human hand. Among the endless dark stretches of the galaxy, there was one sector where every known map had left a blank space. A void labeled only as the Silent Expanse. It was in this region, a place where stars were sparse, where the ardent Voyager, an experimental research vessel, stumbled upon the discovery that would shake humanity's understanding of the universe forever. The ship had been on a routine exploration mission. Nothing special. Captain Thalia Marks sat in the command chair of the Voyager, eyes scanning over the stream of data that filled the cockpit's main console. Beside her sat Dr. Yara Smith, the ship's xenobiologist, tapping away on a holographic terminal. "Anything new on the scan?" Captain Marks asked, her voice calm but tinged with the usual suspicion of a seasoned explorer. Smith's brow furrowed as she flicked through several layers of data. Her fingers paused over one particular set of readings. "There's a faint signal, Captain. It's unlike anything I've seen." Marks leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "A signal? Could it be a distress beacon?" Smith shook her head. "I don't think so. It's erratic, fragmented, more like a residue of something that used to be, but now it's decaying." Marks tapped her fingers on the console, mulling over the possibilities. The Silent Expanse had been explored decades ago, but no ships or expeditions had ventured into it in years. Most had given up, believing it to be a barren stretch of space with nothing of interest, a dead zone. "Are we sure it's not a glitch?" Marks asked. Smith's voice was hesitant. "I thought so at first, but the signal keeps repeating in a pattern. It's too complex for it to be a natural anomaly, and it's coming from a planet." "A planet?" Marks repeated, leaning back in her seat. Her mind raced. "What do we know about it?" "Nothing," Smith replied. "It's never been catalogued. No planet in this sector matches the coordinates." Mark stood up from the command chair, turning toward the crew standing in the cockpit. Lieutenant Brand, the security officer, and Ensign Juno, the communications officer, both looked toward her. He'd made countless decisions in the past, but this one felt different. The implications of this discovery could be enormous, but at the same time dangerous. If it was a distress signal, it could be a trap. If it was something else, something alien, it could be catastrophic. "We have to investigate," Mark said finally, her voice firm. "Plot a course for the signal. Let's see what we're dealing with." Hours later, as the Voyager entered the outer rim of the unknown planet's atmosphere, the first signs of trouble began to show. The ship's sensors started to act up, fluctuating in intensity as if the planet itself was resisting their approach. Dr. Smith, now in the ship's lab, had her face pressed against a data screen, her eyes wide with disbelief. "This is wrong," she muttered to herself. "What's wrong?" Marks asked, appearing in the doorway. "The planet," Smith said without turning her head. "The readings. Atmosphere, radiation, geological structure. They don't match any known class of planet. It's volatile." Marks glanced at the screen. The numbers flickered erratically, jumping from one extreme to another. The readings were chaotic, unlike anything she had ever seen. It was as though the planet was alive, its very nature unpredictable, constantly shifting and changing. "Is it dangerous?" Marks asked. "I can't say," Smith replied. a note of uncertainty in her voice. "The environment is incredibly unstable. There's no clear pattern to it. One minute the atmosphere seems almost breathable, and the next, it's like the air's been ionized by some unknown energy source." Marks felt a chill run down her spine. "Are we in danger?" "I don't know," Smith admitted. "The electromagnetic fields around the planet are strange. It could disrupt our systems if we get too close." Marks took a deep breath and then gave a small nod. "We'll send down a probe first. I'm not taking the Voyager into that until we know more." Brand's voice came over the comms, urgent. "Captain, the electromagnetic fields are already interfering with our systems. We're getting some strange readings from the surface." "Strange how?" Marks asked. "It's like the planet is alive. I'm seeing fluctuations in the gravitational pull," and Brand's voice cut out abruptly, replaced by a burst of static. "Brand," Marks called, a pang of worry creeping into her chest. No response. "Something's wrong," Smith said quietly. "It's like the planet is reacting to us, responding to our presence." "We're too close," Mark said, snapping into action. "Prepare the shuttle. We're sending a team down." Minutes later, Mark, Smith, Brand, and Juno suited up in their best exploration gear. The shuttle, a small, sleek vessel designed for atmospheric landings, was prepped for a quick descent. They were taking every precaution, but Marks couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. The mission had gone from a routine scan to a high-stakes operation in an instant. The shuttle blasted off from the Voyager, cutting through the turbulent atmosphere. As they descended, the view through the viewport was like something from a nightmare. The planet's surface was a violent mass of rolling storms, jagged mountain ranges, and swirling ocean currents. The sky was a sickly green, rippling with strange waves of energy that seemed to distort the very fabric of space. Massive lightning bolts crackled in the distance, illuminating the chaos below. "This place is hell," Brand muttered, eyeing the turbulent landscape. "I don't know how anyone could survive down there." "I'm not sure anyone has," Marks replied grimly. "We're here to find out why." The shuttle's landing gear screeched as it touched down on a flat plateau near a rocky outcrop. As the door opened, the air was thick with heat, and a wave of intense radiation hit them immediately. They all quickly activated their suit's shielding, but even then it felt oppressive. The atmosphere was choking, and the very air tasted like metal and ash. They made their way cautiously toward a nearby cliff, where they saw what they thought was the source of the signal, a jagged structure protruding from the ground. It resembled nothing they had seen before. It wasn't a building, nor was it natural. It seemed to have a strange, organic quality to it, as though it had grown from the planet's surface. "Is that a structure?" Juno asked, her voice filled with awe. "It's too irregular to be man-made," Smith said, her eyes wide. "It's almost as though it's alive." Mark studied the structure. It pulsed faintly, as though breathing, as if it was somehow attuned to their presence. A strange hum emanated from it, and the air around them seemed to vibrate. They all exchanged uneasy glances. "Get a sample," Marks ordered. "We need to know what this is." Before they could proceed, the ground beneath them rumbled. A low, guttural growl echoed through the air, shaking the ground beneath their boots. Brand's hand instinctively went to his blaster. "What the hell was that? I don't know," Mark said, her eyes scanning the horizon. "But I have a bad feeling about this." Suddenly, the structure shifted. The top of it split open, and from within, a blast of hot, acrid air shot out, followed by a voice that was so clear, so distinct that it made Mark's heart stop. "You are on Earth," it said, its tone cold and unyielding. "This is not the Earth you remember. This is the Earth that survives." The voice was like a force of nature in itself, calm yet commanding. its unnatural clarity cutting through the chaos of the storm and the strange electromagnetic pulses that thrummed in the air around them. It was as though the words were not just spoken, but were being pressed directly into their minds. "You are on Earth." The words hung there, heavy and incomprehensible. The reality of it felt like a sick joke, but it was no joke. Mark stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what she had just heard. Earth. It couldn't be. Not Earth. The Earth they had abandoned during the Great Exodus centuries ago, when the planet had fallen to ruin after years of war, environmental collapse, and the ravages of an exhausted ecosystem. Earth had been left behind, a desolate shell of its former self. No one had expected humanity would ever return. But now, this voice, this unearthly presence claimed they were there, on Earth. The captain's mind reeled. This can't be real. Did that just say Earth? Lieutenant Brand's voice was tight, disbelieving. His hand gripped the side of his helmet as if trying to steady himself. Smith, the xenobiologist, had gone utterly still, her eyes wide and fixed on the organic structure that had suddenly opened, releasing an acrid gust of air. The strange shifting metallic patterns on its surface were pulsating with a life of their own. Marks blinked hard, trying to clear her thoughts. "Is this some kind of trick?" she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. "Is this some sort of alien message or interference?" "Doesn't feel like any trick," Brand responded, his voice still edged with uncertainty. He glanced over at Marks, his hand still hovering near his sidearm. "If this is Earth, then why is it like this? It's completely different." Smith spoke up, her voice low and hesitant. "It looks like Earth, the terrain, the geography, the atmosphere, but there's something wrong. Something's changed." She pointed toward the horizon, where the distant mountains rose, jagged and unnaturally twisted. "The biomes, they're distorted, like they've been re-engineered, warped into something far more dangerous." Marks looked toward the mountain range. It was true. The environment was unlike anything she'd seen before. The weather systems were violent and unpredictable, with massive storms rolling through the sky in continuous cycles. Tornadoes ripped across the land while waves of raw energy pulsed from the atmosphere itself. The clouds were not clouds, at least not like any she'd ever seen before. They flickered in and out, dark and turbulent, but there were shapes within them. Shapes that seemed to move. "Captain," Smith said, her voice urgent. "There's something else. The energy readings, these aren't just atmospheric phenomena. There's some kind of intelligence here. The planet itself feels aware." Mark swallowed hard, her instinct screaming at her to leave, to turn the shuttle around and take the crew back to the ardent Voyager. But she knew that wasn't an option. The voice had spoken again, its message still echoing in her mind. "You are intruders, and you will not leave." "What do you mean, aware?" Brand asked, visibly unsettled. He tightened his grip on his blaster. "You're saying this planet is alive?" Smith turned her head slowly, her face pale. "Not in the way you think. I mean, it's aware of us, our presence. We're being watched, monitored. It's like the whole planet is responding to us." Marks couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, the familiar sensation of being hunted creeping up her spine. This wasn't just a desolate, forgotten world. No. This was something far more dangerous. The ground beneath their feet shifted again. A faint tremor ran through the air and the high-pitched hum of energy grew louder, vibrating their bodies. Brand snapped his head up, eyes searching for the source. Something was wrong. The planet was alive, and it was reacting to them. "I don't like this, Captain," Brand said, his voice tight. "We need to leave, now." This isn't just a random planet anymore. Smith took a deep breath. I agree. We're too exposed here, and if the planet is reacting to us, then... Shh, Marks interrupted, her eyes scanning the horizon. She held up a hand signaling the team to stop. The wind had shifted, the storm clouds swirling in unnatural patterns. Something was moving toward them. From the distance, the ground began to stir. Massive shapes, towering insect-like creatures, emerged from the shifting mists. Their bodies were covered in layers of chitin, dark and slick. Their limbs were twisted and jagged, and their eyes glowed like embers, reflecting the toxic energy in the air. Mark's heart slammed in her chest. These creatures, these monsters, were not native to any of the planets they had catalogued. They were bigger, faster, and far more menacing. They moved in coordinated patterns like a hunting pack, their eyes trained on the team's movements. "We need to move," Marks ordered, already heading back toward the shuttle. Her voice was firm, but her mind was racing. Earth had become a death world. This was no longer the world she remembered, but what had happened to it? Before they could take more than a few steps, another rumble split the air. The ground heaved beneath them, and one of the massive insect-like creatures leaped toward them, moving faster than anything they had seen before. The crew scattered, but Bran was too slow. The creature's mandibles clamped down on his suit, lifting him off the ground with terrifying ease. "Bran!" Mark shouted. She drew her weapon, but the creature was already pulling him away, dragging him toward the storm. It was too strong. The storm was pulling them in every direction, disorienting them, blocking their view. Smith was the first to react, firing a warning shot that missed, her aim thrown off by the whirling of the storm. Mark's mind raced. They needed to get back to the shuttle, fast. But if they didn't act now, they'd lose Bran, and with him, any chance of survival on this planet. "Juno!" Marks barked. "Signal the Voyager. Get them to prepare for an emergency extraction. We need to move now." The young communications officer scrambled to her console, working quickly to send out a distress signal. But the air around them was thick with electromagnetic interference, and the signal would likely be weak. They were cut off from the Voyager, isolated on a planet that was no longer Earth as... "They knew it, Captain. The shuttle is getting damaged," Juno shouted as the wind howled even louder. "We can't leave yet." Marks turned, her eyes locked on the creature dragging Bran toward the storm. She could hear his muffled screams over the storm's roar. The sound of the creature's growl reached them again, followed by a deep, rumbling voice. "You are not meant to be here!" The voice echoed through the air, pouring the crew's bones. It was clear now. The planet wasn't just alive. It was aware. It was sentient. Marks didn't hesitate. She ran toward Bran, pushing herself harder than ever before. The storm ripped at her suit, trying to drag her off course, but she fought against it with everything she had. She could barely see through the dust and debris, but she spotted Bran's silhouette being hauled away by the creature, his limbs flailing as he tried to break free. She fired her blaster, hitting the creature square in the side. It howled in pain, releasing Bran, who tumbled to the ground. "Get up!" Marks shouted, pulling him to his feet. They had seconds before the creature recovered. "Go! Run to the shuttle!" The team sprinted toward the shuttle, the storm swirling around them like a living thing. The creature shrieked in fury behind them, but the team pushed on, their hearts pounding in their chests. The distance to the shuttle felt like miles, but finally they reached the landing zone. "Everyone inside," Marks ordered. "Now!" They scrambled into the shuttle, the doors slamming shut just as the creature lunged toward them, its jaws snapping with ferocity. Marks staggered into the cockpit, her heart still racing. She had no idea what they had just discovered, what kind of nightmare they had just stepped into. But one thing was clear. Earth was no longer the home they remembered. It had become a death world, a place where nothing would be spared, not even them. The voice echoed once more, cold and unyielding. "You will never leave this world." And with that, the team of the ardent Voyager realized they were not just intruders on an unknown planet. They were trapped on a world that had once been their home, but had now become something far darker, far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. The shuttle's engines hummed to life with a violent surge of power, but even the roaring thrust couldn't push back the tension that gripped the crew. The metallic walls of the vessel were claustrophobic, the air inside feeling thicker, more oppressive. Marks was at the helm, her hands gripping the controls, eyes flicking back and forth between the display and the viewport. The planet they had just narrowly escaped from loomed ominously in the background, its storm-tossed clouds swirling in dark patterns, as if the very world was a sentient, living thing bent on their destruction. "Cheatham, report!" Marks barked, her voice tight but with the edge of a leader who was determined to regain control of the situation. "Engines are online," Lieutenant Rand replied, his voice hoarse but steady. His voice cracked with lingering fear, but he had pushed it aside for now. "We've got full thrust if we can just get through that atmosphere." "It won't be that simple," Dr. Smith interrupted, her voice strangely calm in contrast to the frantic energy filling the shuttle. She was sitting in the rear of the cabin, running her hands over the datapad, scanning through their systems. Her pale face was illuminated by the harsh red glow of the emergency lights, her eyes narrowed in intense focus. "The planet. It's more than hostile. It's interfering with everything. The radiation levels are spiking, the energy fields are fluctuating, even our shields are being disrupted." Ano, the communications officer, who had been silent up until now, suddenly spoke up. Her eyes were wide, her hands gripping the console as if it might slip away from her at any moment. "Captain," she said, her voice strained with urgency, "I'm still getting transmissions on all frequencies, but they're not human." The air seemed to freeze around them. Mark's heart skipped a beat, and she turned toward Juno. "Explain." Juno's fingers danced over the console. "It's hard to pinpoint exactly the signal. It's faint, but it's everywhere, pulsing. It's like some sort of resonance or frequency that's wrapping around our ship." Smith leaned in closer, her face drawn with a mix of curiosity and dread. "It's like the planet is calling us, or controlling us. I can't pinpoint it, but I've never seen anything like this." Mark stood up abruptly, pacing the cabin as the tension stretched and coiled in her chest. There had to be something more to this, something they were missing. The planet, the creatures, the strange, chilling voice. "You are intruders, and you will not leave." It was all connected, but how? "We need to get out of this atmosphere," Mark said, her voice sharp with resolve. "Once we're in space, we'll be able to recalibrate and get a better sense of what we're dealing with. We're too close to the surface. It's reacting to us." The shuttle rumbled again as it surged toward the planet's atmosphere, its engines screeching as they fought against the planet's chaotic forces. The storm above them grew worse, lightning flashing in blinding arcs that seemed to dance along the horizon, illuminating the twisted, jagged terrain below. Marks gritted her teeth and pulled back on the throttle, guiding the shuttle through the violent turbulence. As they rose higher, the shuttle bucked under the tremendous forces pulling it down. The electromagnetic interference scrambled their communications with the ardent Voyager, but they had little time to spare. This planet was shifting beneath them, its very being seeming to stretch and contort in ways they couldn't comprehend. Even with all their technology, they had no idea how to truly battle against this force. "Shields are weakening," Juno shouted. "The energy from the planet is pulling us back." Mark's fingers danced over the console, her knuckles white as she applied full power to the engines. "We can't stay here. We need to break free of the atmosphere now or we'll be stuck. Smith's voice came from behind her. The planet doesn't want us to leave. It's fighting back. It doesn't want us to escape. Marks felt her stomach twist. There it was again, that sense of something malevolent watching, waiting. This planet isn't just alive. It's aware of us. It's controlling us. We're going to make it, Marks muttered under her breath. Come on, come on. His shuttle groaned as it shot upward, pushing against the atmospheric pressure. Outside, the clouds seemed to twist and swirl as if they were alive, the very sky fighting them. The deep rumbling of the planet's storm system reverberated through the shuttle's hull. Mark's hands were slick with sweat, the air inside the cabin thick with the feeling of suffocating pressure, and then with a violent shudder the shuttle broke free. For a brief moment there was silence. The chaos of the planet below them was gone. The sky was black and vast, the stars distant and cold, like they should have been. Marks exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "We're out," she said, her voice quiet, but a weight lifted from her shoulders. "We're in orbit." Juno let out a sigh of relief. "I've lost the signal. It seems like we're clear for now." But Smith didn't seem relieved. In fact, she looked more disturbed than ever. "Captain," she said, her voice low, "we're not safe. Not yet. The worst part of this planet isn't its storms or its creatures. It's what it's becoming. It's like the planet has been reshaped, transformed into something else entirely." Marks turned toward her, an uneasy knot forming in her stomach again. "What do you mean? It's Earth. It can't—" "Yes," Smith cut in. "It was Earth. But now it's something else. A Class 14 death world. I've seen creatures like that before, in older data on other planets. Worlds that were naturally hostile to any form of life. Worlds that had been twisted by time, energy, or unknown forces. This planet has been Earth has become something more dangerous than anyone could imagine. We need to get back to the Ardent Voyager," Mark said. "We need to report to command. This isn't just a rogue planet. This is something far worse. Whatever this planet has become, it's not just hostile, it's dangerous on a scale we can't even comprehend. But we can't just leave yet." Bran interjected, his voice rough from earlier. "There are answers here. We need to know how this happened, why it's here. We need to understand how Earth became a death world." Marks hesitated. She had been about to call for an immediate retreat, but Bran's words lingered in her mind. Could they really leave without knowing the full extent of this discovery? Could they return to the Voyager without understanding what they were up against? Before she could respond, the ship's alarms blared, loud, shrill, and unnerving. "What is that?" Juno gasped, her hands flying over the console. "He planet's pulling us back again," Smith shouted, her voice laced with fear. Suddenly the shuttle began to shake. A violent force pushed against the vessel, as though an invisible hand was reaching up from the planet below and clutching them in its grasp. Marks fought to keep the shuttle steady, her teeth clenched, her hands on the controls slick with sweat. "We need to break free," she barked. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." "Brace yourselves." His shuttle lurched as if caught by a massive force. Mark's fingers worked furiously over the console, trying to override the ship's systems. The turbulence worsened, and every movement felt like they were being pulled back into the planet's gravitational field. The shuttle was going to crash. They were going to be pulled back down to Earth. "Hold on," Marks shouted. "We're not giving up. Not yet." She fought with everything she had, struggling against the planet's relentless grip. They couldn't let it win. They couldn't let Earth win. Not like this. As the shuttle spiraled downward, the cold voice from the planet's surface rang out once more, cutting through the chaos. "You will never leave. You are part of this world now." And then the sky below them erupted in a flash of energy so intense it blotted out everything else. The ardent Voyager watched helplessly from orbit as the shuttle vanished into the swirling depths below. The crew had disappeared, without a trace, and Earth, now far from the home they once knew, began to reshape itself once more.